Hi, I'm Jenny Miller of Let's Get Sewing. Are you ready to take the fear and frustration out of your sewing journey and finally conquer sewing? Then you are in the right place. Today we're going to be talking about finishing the edges of our facing in our garments. Now, why is this important? Because facings are hidden on the inside of your garment, but it's nice to have everything on the inside looking nice and neat in case anybody sees it, but also because if you haven't finished your edges very well, you can get a lot of fraying and threads and things like that on the inside that start to tangle and bother you. So it's just nice to have it all finished from the beginning. And so, yes, this outfit is inside out. And the reason I did that was to show how I have finished off my facings and all of the edges of my seams, seam allowances, just so that everything looks nice and tidy on the inside. So let me talk to you a little bit about different ways that we can finish off the edges of this facing. You don't necessarily have to have a serger, and here's why. As you can see, this piece of facing has been finished on a serger. And I will say that's typically what I use when I am finishing the edges because it's easy, fast, and I have it accessible. But if you don't have a serger, you have other options. One of those options is to zigzag very close to the edge. This was a 3 millimeter stitch length and a 3 millimeter stitch width, which is your average zigzag setting on any sewing machine. Once you've zigzagged, you can see that there are still threads that want to pull out here along the edge. And so then you just want to go back and trim right along that edge without cutting any of your stitches. If you do, it's not the end of the world. They can come undone, but you could just go back over it if it's really bothering you. But try not to cut them. Go right along that very edge of the fabric and trim it off so that now your zigzags are right along the edge, and any threads that want to fray will get caught by the zigzag and you'll have a nicely finished edge. Another option similar to the zigzag is to use one of the overlock stitches on your sewing machine. Not all sewing machines have an overlock stitch, but if yours does, it probably looks something like a blanket stitch or buttonhole stitch on your settings, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute. But I've used this stitch here and it looks like a zigzag, but it stitches out here along the edge for 2 or 3 stitches, then zigzags in, stitches right along the edge for 2 or 3, and zigzags in. Those 2 or 3 stitches along the edge are what is going to catch all of those frayed pieces, and again you have a nicely finished edge to your interfacing. Here are the 2 overlock stitch settings on my machine. They kind of look like a buttonhole stitch or blanket stitch in these drawings, but you would probably have something similar on your machine. The last option that you have for finishing the edge of your interfacing is to just turn that edge under and stitch it, which gives a very nice finish to that edge. What I did was to trim off the seam allowance off of my interfacing before I fused it to the fabric. Then I fused it on, and I have just turned this edge and I'm stitching very close to the edge. And I would just continue to do that. And as long as I am right up against the edge, I'm not going to get puckers in my seam. And I'm just going to fold that right along the interfacing and stitch it down. And then you can just go back and trim off a little bit of the excess fabric, just so that you don't have a lot underneath there that's again going to fray and stick out. And then you have a very nice edge to this interfacing as well. You only need to finish the edges of the facing that will be exposed. So anything that's going to get sewn in the seam of the neckline or underneath here, anything that would be caught in the front facing does not need to be finished beforehand because it obviously will be hidden after your garment is sewn. So look at the piece and determine what will be those outside edges and just finish those edges before you start sewing anything. I do all of this work before I start sewing anything on my garment getting all of these edges finished beforehand, then all I have to do is sew up my project according to the pattern directions, and everything turns out looking nice on the inside. Getting a nice finished look on the inside of your garment gives it that nice kind of professional feel, makes you feel really good about your project, and makes it look nicer, hang and lay a little bit nicer on your body, and just gives you an overall better outcome. So I hope you found this helpful. If you want to know about fusing interfacing to your facing piece, you can check out my previous video. I'll put the link below, and you'll be set for doing facings on all of your sewing projects.